back in 2010, my YouTube channel, I did 100 video blog posts in 100 days. Every day I got to the office, opened up the flip cam, and because there were no phones that would handle it.
Everyone had a flip cam.
Everybody did. Opened up the flip cam and did 2 minutes. That was back in the day, your 2-minute video limit. And I picked up subscribers. I picked up people who had questions, and it just got me comfortable, right? Until you do it, until you hear your own voice and see your own face and do all those different things, you got to get to this comfort zone where you get to like, I am what I am, and I don't care anymore. I'm going to talk to people, right?
Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Hey everyone, it's Alex Acuff here and Bennett Clark, your hosts of the Connecting B2C podcast. Today we are so fortunate. We've got the host of the Real Estate Sessions podcast on today, Bill Risser. He's also the VP of Digital Strategy for Fidelity National Title. He's located in Tampa, Florida. And real quickly, Bill, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah, VP of Digital Strategy. My role really is to help realtors, lenders, real estate professionals be smarter with technology. That's it in one sentence. I think that I've been in the business for 18 years, ran an escrow operation in Phoenix for 10 of those 18 years, and since 2011, full time, this has been my role, just to try and learn what I can about technology, whether it's social or digital or content creation, whatever it is, and help agents that are struggling with that. And obviously, it helps our sales team secure appointments and talk to people, and that's a good thing for people in sales, right? You want to have conversations. So that's kind of my role.
All right, very cool. Thanks for coming on, Bill. Bennett, so with every podcast, we want to make sure that the audience knows exactly how we're connected to Bill, and I think that comes from Bennett. So I'm going to hand it over to you, buddy.
Sure, and thanks again for coming on. Bill put out a message during Inman the Inman conference in San Francisco a few weeks ago about hosting a podcast lunch, and he served as one of the ambassadors. So here in a minute, I'll have him just take us briefly through what exactly an ambassador is for the Inman conference. But I immediately saw that, jumped right on it, and we went to have lunch with a fairly small group, maybe about 12 of us, and we just covered the various topics as far as getting started and people who had been in the business a long time and had different backgrounds. But our connecting point was definitely from Inman Conference and the Ambassador Luncheon. So, Bill, if you don't mind, give us a little background about the Ambassador.
Yeah, so I've been a part of the Inman community since 2010. They had back in the day, they had a thing called Agent Reboot. I connected with Katie Lance, who was the community, kind of the social media person for Inman back in that time. So Katie Lance and Chris Smith were working together at Inman. They came to Phoenix, which is where I was working, and I became an ambassador for that first Agent Reboot event. And it was a lot of fun. All you really had to do was promote the event and be able to share it, kind of live stream it out with Twitter or Facebook, whatever you wanted to do. And it led me to a point where Katie asked me if I wanted to come up to San Francisco later that year. And that just kind of led to a few more. I think I've been an ambassador for 6 or 7. I've been to 10 Inman Connects. I think it's the real estate, technology connecting event of the year. So for me, it's a no-brainer. And so that's how I got started with that. As far as the podcast lunch, we started that in New York, where the ambassadors would get together. And we had one of the lunches was talking about micro networking, and we had little topics that we came up with. And so Sean Carpenter, one of the other ambassadors, and myself, and we have a little side project podcasting, decided to do this up in New York, and it was a success there. We did it again in San Francisco, had even a few more agents there. And it was really just a way to, kind of make a little connecting point, the way you talked about on your show, and answer questions, which I think we did. We answered a lot of questions, right, Bennett?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Bennett, you were the first guy to sign up, so I just want to give you props for that. So.
I was ready.
He was all on board once we started talking about doing this. So he's been gung-ho about podcasts since. And he sent me the link immediately about y'all's lunch, because unfortunately I was held back. I had a baby born at that time. So new dad, no sleep. And but I am getting updates from Bennett about the podcast lunch and getting to meet you and everything. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And you've been to way more Inman Connects than me. I've been to one, and I will be back for number 2.
I'm also older. So that's
absolutely. So hey, while we're since we're on the topic of podcasts today, and that's really what we're going to stick to, let's talk a little bit about some of the history. I've been a podcast listener for about 5 years, probably right now, and I almost consider myself almost an early adopter, and I think you do too from our conversation off air. And I'd like for you to kind of cover a little bit, because I feel like the metamorphosis is like from indie to commercialized. And I'd like for you to kind of touch on that a little bit and let our audience know, kind of give them more depth about podcasts and where it came from.
Yeah, it started in 2004, and it seems like it just was way older than that, right? But the actual transferring of an audio file, delivering it to somebody who could download to a device, which, by the way, was an iPod back in the day, started in 2004. In fact, I use Libsyn, Liberated Syndication, which was the very first podcast hosting site that started right then and there at the beginning, 2004, 2005. They're still doing their thing. And so the early on, it really was, I like to call it like the pirate radio station. Just people wanted to have a way to broadcast, and you could do it easily. And it didn't require having an internet radio set up or all this other stuff. You just had to record an audio file and get it hosted somewhere. So real simple. But it definitely took a turn. I would say for me, it felt like 2009, 2010, you started hearing a lot more. I know that right around 2009 is when Adam Carolla, he was one of the replacements for Howard Stern when Howard Stern left terrestrial radio and went to satellite. He came in, and there were a bunch of people. David Lee Roth was in there, Adam Carolla. They lasted for maybe a year or so, and then things didn't work out the right way, so he decided to start a podcast. Built a studio out in Glendale, and became quickly the most downloaded podcast in the history of podcasting in his first year. Millions of downloads right away. And so that really opened a whole bunch of eyes for people that, wow, this is something that can be monetized on a commercial level, make serious money, right? And so that really opened the floodgates. You had developers come in and create easier to use hosting systems. A lot of stuff changed at that point. So, and I think as we go on today, we're up to about 20% of the people admit to listening to podcasts. That's not bad. So
I think it's great.
Yeah, it'll continue growing. I just think it will. We're already time shifting everything, right? We all got DVRs. We're watching shows when we want to watch them. The only probably exceptions, live sports. You don't want to get screwed up with that. So you got to kind of watch that live. But, so we're doing that already with television. Now we're going to do it with our audio content as well. And I think terrestrial radio is struggling. I really do. I really struggle to think. I think the only time I flip on regular old-fashioned radio is when I can't get my satellite signal or I don't have a podcast to listen to, right? And that's very, very rare. So
it's interesting that you say some of that just as the background, because when I first met Alex, our conversation got into what do you do to pass the time while you're renovating houses or working on these houses? And for him, he was like, oh, I listen to podcasts. And I'm just like, not really. I listen to Kentucky Sports Radio. And it's basically podcast or radio is used as a time filler, almost while we multitask. We're a society that just, constantly is doing multiple things at, multiple times. So I think it's just interesting to hear the background and transition of how this, kind of really has come about.
Right. Like I drive a couple thousand miles a month, right? Because I've got a big territory. I'm north of Tampa all the way down to Naples. So, tomorrow I'm headed down to Fort Myers for a few days. And podcasts are perfect. I've got this library of episodes that get a little backlog because I was busy this weekend, and I'm going to go ahead and, catch up. Can't wait, when I hit the road in the morning.
I do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the equipment that's used. Is there something that, as far as somebody who's putting out a podcast, not necessarily listening, what's the difference between being on the go and being kind of where you are now, in the office or at your home, wherever your studio is?
Yeah.
And then tie in whether it's low tech versus high tech, or is there some type of happy medium?
Yeah, I when people ask me about starting a podcast, my first response is, look, a pair of earbuds and a computer, you're good to go. I know you have those already. You can grab Zoom for free and you can start doing a podcast because you can strip the audio off. So don't overproduce in the beginning. Get 10 podcasts under your belt. You decide you want to continue, like you like doing it. At that point, you can start talking about acquiring more equipment. Look, I'm a massive fan of Podcast Motor. It's a website that has lots of good ideas and tips and tricks. And so I follow their stuff, pretty closely. And so that's where I got ideas for moving my equipment up as time moved on. I'd say my biggest, I love doing podcasts in person. They're not as many as I want to do, but like I have one coming up this Friday with one of the top lenders in the country who happens to be in the Bay Area here. And I'm going to sit down with her. I have a Tascam DR40 field recorder. I love this little thing. It's got XLR mic plugins, and we'll actually sit there, hold mics, and talk to each other. And the sound quality is amazing. I like the experience, and we're doing it here. I get to look and see, the reactions you're having. But face-to-face is amazing. So that field recorder, about $180 for that recorder, and the mics were 40 or 50 each. I use a different mic at home. I use an Audio Technica ATR 2020 USB mic. I still use my computer for my main source. I don't record into the field recorder. I haven't gone to the point yet in a podcast where I buy a separate mixing board, different inputs. I don't know if I'll ever get there, to be quite honest. That's a whole nother level. But I've seen people early in their podcast careers get that setup, spend the $500 or $600 or $800, and end up selling it on Craigslist for $200. So start small. And in fact, Alex, we were talking about this before. Anchor pivoted completely from being a 2-minute audio clip, which was cool when it first started, to they're saying now, start your podcast here. I was at the Florida Real Estate Bar Camp. We had about 500 people before the Florida State Convention. And a gentleman stood up and said, I use Anchor to podcast now. I love it. I said, wow, that's great. So it's out there. Awesome. It works. Yeah, it's automatically posting it right up for you. You don't do very much editing on it, but that's okay in the beginning. Don't get too worried about editing. Don't get too worried about commercials. Don't get too worried about a whole lot of overproduction. Just get that content out, whether it's you talking about a topic or it's you talking to somebody. So that's the equipment side of things, Ben, as far as I see.
I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Anchor. Anchor was one of those things where I had my own station and I was the only listener. And I was like, hey, it seems like everyone just says, put out content. And that was actually the platform I went to just put out, like 30 days, do like a month. Like every day I came home from the gym and I was like, hey, it's the Real Estate Ride Along with Alex Acuff. And I would just talk about something real estate, real cheesy, but it's just one of those things where you just got to knock it out until you feel comfortable, really. I think that's the big thing.
Look, I'll give you one last thing. I did, back in 2010, my YouTube channel, I did 100 video blog posts in 100 days. Every day I got to the office, opened up the flip cam, and because there were no phones that would handle it.
Everyone had a flip cam.
Everybody did. Opened up the flip cam and did 2 minutes. That was back in the day, your 2-minute video limit. And I picked up subscribers. I picked up people who had questions, and it just got me comfortable, right? Until you do it, until you hear your own voice and see your own face and do all those different things, you got to get to this comfort zone where you get to like, I am what I am and I don't care anymore. I'm going to talk to people, right?
Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Exactly right. Yeah.
That's something that we spoke with last episode with Pinky Benson.
That's right. Yeah, Sue. Yeah. She's amazing. Yeah, had a great chance to interview her, and I'll see her this Wednesday down in Naples. So
great. That's awesome. So let's move into someone's looking to start a podcast. Let's talk about defining an audience. Where do you even start? I think, for me personally, 5 years ago, I wanted to do it, but I was like, I don't think there's much of an audience that wants to even hear me. But what are your tips to people that are talking to you saying, hey, I want to start a podcast. What do I do with an audience?
Right. So, personally, my audience is people in the real estate industry. Right. And there are lots of real estate podcasts where that's their audience. They want to talk to other realtors and, kind of show them what they know and maybe even, take that to a different place. But I think for the majority of people, the ability to create content, share information about where your market is, where you live, where you work, where you play, all those things, there are tons of opportunities. And I've interviewed guys like Phil Greeley and Margaret Giguere, and they're doing great things by really sharing their love of their cities, whether it's, Portland, Seattle, Tacoma. I mean, there's a lot of the people doing it back there. The two of you are doing it now. I know I can see this going one day where you're talking more and more about your markets and some other things, right? So I think that there's huge opportunity to find that community of people who want to know more about the things that happen where they live. I'm just a huge believer in that niche being a really easy one to conquer if you're one of the few people that are trying to, generate an audience there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, as far as the things to do to build that audience, I'll speak here from my failures because when I started the podcast, my goal was, just to see how it worked and to be able to do it and to be able to publish and see what it looked like. And I wasn't really thinking about it long term. I really didn't think I'd be doing it, 3 years later. And so I didn't create a Facebook group that really needed to be created where you could start inviting people in who listen to the podcast because that has this organic growth to it. I didn't even create a Facebook page. I was worried about a website. Got a website pretty early in the game and got away from the Libsyn provided kind of, older style site. But the ability with Facebook to build this community up, and I love what you two are doing. You're going through Facebook at the front end of it. The podcast is available as a podcast, but you've got this going as well, and that's what builds an audience. So, a shout out to another podcaster. It would be Onion Juice, right? Neil Methweg up at Mathweg up in Wisconsin. He really focused hard on his Facebook group and built up his listenership, downloads, and all that good stuff that way. So I would really focus on the social side of things. Make sure that you're promoting on all the channels that we have available to us to promote. I would consider launching a podcast as opposed to one day I just had a podcast and sent out some emails and put a post up on Facebook and I got 12 downloads the first day and I'm like, wow, 12 people. It's awesome. So I think there's a more tactical way to launch a podcast if you decide to do it. So think those things through a little bit. That way you're a little more effective at the beginning.
Sure. And one thing that helped Alex and myself is just that having a partner in this keeps you accountable. If you were just doing this by yourself, or if I were, I think it'd be a lot harder to come up with the content, come up with engaging, discussions, and being able to have a back and forth method to it really helps. But it definitely helps in even more because I think we share just a similar business model. He deals some in new construction. I deal some in new construction. He deals a little bit in renovation. I deal in renovation. And then we both serve general buyers and sellers within our market. And we have athletic backgrounds, and we're two guys that really sound like we're from the South. So, all in all, it's a good combo. So if you're getting started with the podcast, maybe it's important to reach out and maybe link on to somebody else that's, has a lot of similar characteristics to yourself.
Yeah, it's how I started my second podcast, right? Sean Carpenter, who was the other ambassador that we hooked up with at Podcast Lunch in New York, San Francisco. I was about 30 or 40, 50 episodes deep, and he said, "You need to do one on sports, because we talk sports all the time." And I said, "I'm not going to do another one by myself. You do it, I'll do it." And damn it, he said he would. So there comes another podcast I got to worry about. But so we record that weekly as well. It's just three guys, two guys who went to UF, and I came out of the West Coast, just talking sports, what happened that week. And it's three guys getting together to have a beer who like each other and have a great time. We just happen to record it. And I think, that's that passion side of having a podcast, or if you're, no matter what it is, I know people who love to write. I don't get that, but they're passionate about writing. If you're passionate about writing, write by all means, because it's a powerful medium. But for me, it's much easier just to kind of have a conversation with people. And that's yeah.
I was just going to say, don't you think that it also lets whatever audience out there connect even more with you to say, man, this Bill guy, all he talks about is real estate. No, not really. He likes beer and sports. And that is a personal connection to, and helps bring, more people to your audience.
I agree. I think, and part of the reason, if we get into the philosophy behind, what kind of show you want, right? I think that I knew from the get-go. In fact, it was an Adam Carolla podcast. Brian Grazer is a producer with Tom Hanks. He did it with Ron Howard. They made a bunch of movies. And he wrote a book called A Curious Mind. And every month he goes to lunch with somebody important or smart or whatever. It could just be a scientist, but he'll take these people to lunch because he wants to pick their brain and find out what makes them tick. And the book's amazing. And so I read that, I listened to his episode, and I said, I can do that. I want to do that, but I want to do it in the real estate space. And so that's why Jay Thompson, the guy who just retired from Zillow, who handled the social media stuff, Jay's a personal friend from Phoenix. He was my first guest. And then it was people in the Arizona area for the most part, and my Inman connections, where I was able to reach out to them and create kind of an audience quickly. Katie Lance was number 3, and Sean Carpenter was number 4, and Chris Smith was in there pretty early. So I had this opportunity to kind of build this audience up. And, I still, to this day, I recorded an episode this morning, and this woman's amazing, the stuff she's doing in McLean, Virginia. And I was able to ask her a bunch of questions, even about growing up in Missouri and going to SMU. What I find that most realtors didn't know they're going to be a realtor until way late in the game. And so the podcast was my avenue to ask those questions.
Let's jump right into that, because now you're hitting on that next topic is getting quality guests.
Yeah.
Let's I think one thing, me and Bennett, our angle is Inman. Our audience are people that have been to Inman. We want people that want to know about tech. That's our audience. And that's why we bring on people that are connected in that environment. Let's talk a little bit about your strategy about getting guests, about quality guests.
Oh, it's Inman without a doubt, right? I would, of 155 guests, I know 100 of them through Inman without a connection that started through Inman, for sure. I think, first of all, the two of you doing the show together, bringing a guest on, adds a complete layer of complexity to a podcast. Many podcasters just go on and do 20 minutes on their own topic, and there's not the I don't want to call it headache, but the work of getting a guest together, finding a time when all of you can get together. Yeah, the prep work for an interview, all that sort of stuff creates a layer of complexity that you got to be prepared for. And so for me, I knew a lot of people that were known nationally from my Inman connections, and they were the ones I was going to really target early to build a listenership, because they had big spheres of influence when they put out the episode and they pushed it out, that I got more and more downloads from those sorts of people. Personally, connecting it back to what I do with Fidelity National Title, I interview local people that are doing great things here in the Tampa Bay area, right? So whether it's, Martha Thorne of the Thorne Collection, or Anthony Malafronte, from My Florida Executives, it's going to be Jane Floyd this week. These are really top producing people that we would love to work with. And so the podcast works as a way for me to then bring value to them, because I can share their story. They can then use that however they want, and it helps me because it builds up, my credibility in the local market, and it helps our sales team. So there is a strategy behind it for me. It does help us in our business connect with more people, and I love the title, Connecting. I mean, that's exactly what this is all about: is how do I make better connections that can help our business grow?
Absolutely, and I think really with our title, it originated as at the week after Inman in New York. I reached out to him and was like, I want to do one called Connecting B2C. And that started really as a play off my initials. But as Alex and I got talking, there's a lot of different B2C real connections where it's business to consumer, builder to client, along those other lines. And then just as you can see in our title, isn't it about time we just skipped over A? And that really is coming from the mindset of how the Inman Conference operates. They get up there and they've got 5 minutes to say what they need to say. If you talk for 6 minutes, they're going to yank you off the stage. Yeah. So don't get up there and talk about stuff that everybody already knows. Let's skip over that and let's get directly into the meat and potatoes, as Alex calls it, of what connects people. So, and I think you kind of leads into my next question. You teed off on it just a little bit. So tying your podcast to business and conferences, do you find that you get the content and get the guests not just from these conferences, but how do you go out and expand on that and really keep the thing rolling as far as keeping content engaging and tying it back to your business and maintaining that cycle?
Yeah. So, early on I had a lot of people to kind of, I don't want to call it burn through, but a lot of people that were just on my wish list. And I've been able to handle a lot of those people already. I'm at the point now where, I have PR companies and people reaching out to me saying, hey, I've got a great guest for your podcast. And so as you stick with it, right, this is what comes. Because I think on Overcast, I was in the top ranked business podcast for some reason. That's fine with me. But they found me and they started reaching out. Now, I would say half of the guests I've put on, the other half I said, no, thank you, because it was going to be an obvious sales pitch. And I try really hard to make the podcast about the person and their background. I do talk about their business or their book or their podcast, whatever it is, but I want to make sure that they understand, I have a very unique flow, like much like you do on your show. It works a certain way. And if you got to be careful not to take a guest that doesn't fit into, what you're trying to accomplish. And so for me, and as I kind of stated earlier, I'm always looking for people that bring value to the group of, to the real estate community. It's got to be based on real estate eventually. And that allows me then to, once again, reach out locally to the top producers in my area that I want to interview, that I want to talk to, or even up and comers. I interviewed Sheena Reagan. She's only a realtor for about a year, but she worked in the title industry for 10. She's also a stand-up comedian who was voted Florida's funniest female. And that intrigued the hell out of me, because now you've got this person who is in real estate, but she's not going to be a realtor for long if she has her, if her wishes come true. And so it's an interesting look at a younger person, trying to, she knows a lot about the industry, but we talked a lot about what she's trying to do, right? So those kinds of things I just feel are different. I think I know people tell me all the time that they love finding out something new about somebody they thought they knew pretty well. And so for me, trying to make that kind of come back to the business, it's really, what's going to be interesting, what's something that I want to do, because
Sure.
It's something I'm passionate about.
Got to be a fit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hope people were taking notes on that.
It's fun. It's fun stuff. You just make it fun. We said that forever, right? If you love what you do, it's not really a job, right? Now, this isn't my job. This doesn't pay bills, but I love what I do.
It's a passion.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about how can a podcast potentially become a revenue earning thing?
Yeah, so multiple ways, right? The easiest, I think most people want ads right away. That's their thought. I'll just get ads on my podcast. That's hard to do. You're looking at, you need 20,000 downloads a month to even think about it. And that's a lot of downloads. But then before that, if you wanted to do some affiliate marketing stuff and you wanted to promote a product that when they use the link in your show notes, that you get 20% of every sale, right? That's basic affiliate marketing online. There are people who make 6 figures in that world by being very good at having people find what they're talking about so they can click on their link as opposed to going to Amazon and searching for the product themselves. So those are probably the 2 key ways. 1, affiliate marketing. 2, when you get a big listenership, to then find advertisers that work in that space that would want to be a part of that audience that you're reaching out to, right? So that's, for me, those are the 2 ways that are going to work. Personally, I don't worry about too much about the monetization of my podcast. I'm all about trying to bring value.
Like that.
Alex, why don't you take us into our open forum and some of the recommendation topics?
Yeah, so you have a wealth of knowledge, and you've already given us some. You kind of already hit on quite a few recommendations with onion juice and a curious mind. So I kind of made a note of those. Good. I'm about to go download the Audible version.
Yeah, perfect.
I know. So let's talk about some recommendations. When we bring a guest on, our audience, they're wanting to either go listen to or buy or find a book or a podcast, what you would, since we're on the topic of podcasts, what are your recommendations to the real estate agent out there that is looking for, of course they can go to the real estate sessions. That's probably number one. But what would be your number two recommendation?
An inspiration for me early on was Marguerite Giguère. She goes by Marguerite Martin now, but Move to Tacoma is a great podcast and a great website. She's built an entire business based on, anyone who wants to know anything about Tacoma, they're going to go to Marguerite. So that's a great one in the real estate space. I'll tell you, there's a video blog out there that I like a lot. His name is Alex Wang. He's in Silicon Valley, so it's a quite different price point from a lot of rest of the country. But Alex does a great video blog. You can alexwang.com is his website. Really kind of modeling Gary Vee. I think he has a full-time photographer following him. So it's this high-level stuff. It's pretty cool. Marguerite's is more simple, right? She just interviews local people in her community. So I like that a lot. Another podcast that's going to take you away from real estate, but I think we need to stay focused on our attitudes and maybe trying to be happier in our life. Wouldn't that help your business if you're happier? So I heard Gretchen Rubin on Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss is like one of the biggest podcasts in the world. But Gretchen Rubin was a guest, and she wrote a book on happiness, and her podcast is called Happier. And I listen to every episode because there's always something in there where I go, wow, that's right. Maybe I could work on that. So just kind of working on your own personal, your own personal productivity. Check out Happier. I like that one a lot. And then one book that it comes from connecting. It's Never Eat Alone. Have either one of you heard about that book yet? Yeah. Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. Wonderful book on the power of connecting, the power of networks, and how to do it, how to kind of reach out to people that you don't know. There's really good tips and tricks and advice in that book. So it's helped me a lot. Reach out to people that I figured they'd never be on the podcast. Glenn Sanford, the CEO of EXP, was just a few episodes ago, right? So that was just, sometimes you just got to ask. So
nice. I like that. Yeah. I like that. For me, the most recent one I found that is just mind blowing as far as organizational is Jordan Harbinger. That guy is insanely good at podcasting, and his whole crew. It's so concise. They've got it down. It is an absolute science over there. They do such a great job.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, that's probably one of my new favorite ones. But Tim Ferriss, his interview with the sommelier, which is an old episode, is amazing. And then the one with the Navy SEAL was really cool too.
Yeah. He's, you got to be ready. You got to have a long trip for a Tim Ferriss.
Yeah. They're like anywhere from 45 minutes to like 2.5 hours.
Correct. So you got to be all in.
And then the ones about psychedelics are just insane. They just take you down a rabbit hole. You just don't even know.
Right.
But, well, Bill, is there, I don't really ask this question a whole lot, and I'd like to ask you, is there anything that we should have asked you that we didn't about podcast?
No, you covered the bases. I think that I think it's great that on your show you're talking to other realtors and other small business owners about how important it is to share what they know, to get that content out there. So I think that part of it maybe gets overlooked, but you're creating this library that's always there, always accessible, of content about whatever you are a specialist in or whatever your audience is looking for. I tell realtors all day long, you know what someone's going to ask you or say to you before they ask it. Every time. So why aren't you creating content around that? Why aren't you making it easy to find? So that people are looking for it, you've already got it, or you could say, you know what, I've got this right here. Let me send it to you. So
I think Brad Inman really nailed it with creating Inman Connect and creating that environment of sharing and not worrying about your competitors in your market, but going beyond that. And so it really takes you to the next level and brings a ton of value to everyone around you. So, Bill, we're going to wrap things up here and put a bow on it. I'd like for you to tell our audience where they can find you, if there's any hashtags or Facebook, YouTube pages, podcasts. Let's go ahead and have you hit up those.
Yeah. So look, I'm Bill Risser everywhere on
Okay.
any social network. It's pretty simple.
Google it.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate with the name. The podcast website's just therealestatesessions.com. It's on iTunes and Stitcher and Overcast and Play and every place else you find podcasts. So yeah, I'd love if they'd give it a listen. And there's some great episodes out there. I think, with some wonderful people, as you talked about, Alex, absolutely sharing exactly what they do. There are some old school realtors and old school sales professionals who flip out when they see these people sharing all their secrets, and I don't think they'll ever understand, right? But it's the way things work today. So,
absolutely. Well, thanks, Bill, for coming on. Bennett, as always, it's always a pleasure with Kentucky in the house. Anyways, you guys feel free to follow us on Facebook. Make sure to hit the like button. Share this with your friends. We'd love for them to get a piece of this content. And also reach out to Bill. If you have something awesome to say, please let Bill know exactly what you learned. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Bill or Bennett or I. We'd love to hear from you guys. And as always, leave a fun 5-star review for us. So until next time, guys, we will see you on the Connecting BDC podcast.
Thanks again. See ya.